We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. The October 2nd, 2023 Public Safety Committee meeting of Lakewood City Council. We have two members of the committee present, so that's enough, I guess, to bring it to order. The first order of business is review and approval of the July 31st, 2023 meeting minutes of the Public Safety Committee. Is there a motion to approve that? Second, then it stands as approved. Secondly, the order of business we have, it's technically two things. It's a communication as well as an ordinance. So we can kind of dive in. The communication, was with regards to, they call them traffic guards in the code, but I will refer to them as crossing guards because I think that's what everyone commonly refers to them as. And that's essentially the folks that the city of Lakewood hires through the police department to staff certain intersections for both public and private schools in Lakewood with children walking to and from school. So in the morning and in the afternoon after school. And I want to thank the administration has been really good in kind of outlining what our current traffic guard locations are, particularly the police department, Chief Fisher and Lieutenant Duiker have done a great job of kind of outlining where we're at. This was a little bit of a community conversation that came up with one particular location, but it brought on kind of a more global review of everything. So we have two exhibits I think council staff is looking to try to bring up, but the first one is the existing locations, and I'm wondering if either Chief Fisher or Lieutenant Duiker would like to talk about kind of just why we have folks where they're at, kind of what our existing system looks like, and then also talk a little bit about some of the challenges with hiring. I know that's one of our biggest issues is hiring folks to work a 2.5, 3 hour day. So I don't know who from the administration wants to tackle that, whether it's the police department or the planning department, to kind of go into some of those challenges.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. So I'm mostly going to defer to Lieutenant Duiker, who's in charge of the crossing guards, and I know he's been working with you. You had dialogue with him about some of the changes you'd like to see. The only thing I'm going to speak about are the challenges in hiring. For better or worse, it's not a job that is highly sought after because of the unique hours. 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon. It takes a person with circumstances that allows them to do that and that kind of work, and there just aren't that many out there. We just lost another one last week due to another situation, but when we can't fill those are then filled by other city workers who are then taken away from their tasks, whatever the streets department or public works, whoever is assigned that day, parking, and eventually a police officer. So a lot of those, it seems to be more in the wintertime, a lot of call-offs. The first snow, I think we'll have about 10 of them. And then we're scrambling to find people. And the public works individuals that do it have it in their contract that they're paid overtime, which is great for them, but it's a cost incurred by the city, and it also is a doubly hindering because then that person is not able to do their job. So I'll let Lieutenant Duiker kind of take over from there about where the guards are and how we came to where we are today.
The tech guy. There we go. Perfect. When we have call-offs, dispatch will sit there and try and fill them with our substitutes first. By ordinance, we've got 29 permanent crossing locations and then 6 substitutes were authorized for. Currently, we're down to 5 substitutes, some of which are only able to work either days or afternoons, depending on what their situation is. So we're even further limited as to what we can do from there. When those folks aren't able to cover it, the next folks in the sequence would be our 2 parking enforcement officers. And then anything beyond that goes to public works and ultimately, like the chief mentioned, to our regular patrol personnel that are out on the road. The start of the school year, I should say, when we had a meeting in early August. I went from having, I believe, 2 crossing guard positions to fill to 4 plus a substitute spot. We still have 2 permanent crossing locations that we're still looking to fill, and the sub spot as well. To give you an insight as to the hiring challenges, we had 2 interviews scheduled for this morning. Neither party showed up. The one, and this is kind of an anomaly, actually sent an email at 8:32 trying to complain that I didn't give her a phone number to call off. And I said, well, you're interviewing at the police station, you would think that would be easy enough to figure out, or you could have sent an email to the address you just sent one to, maybe before the interview that you were supposed to appear for. So that's the reality of it in 2023. Like the chief hit on, you've got a split schedule. There's only going to be a limited demographic that's able to pull that off. We had somebody we were looking at a couple months ago that we're pretty enthusiastic about potentially hiring. She worked a school job in the middle of the day, and from her own account, this will be great. I can sit there and get my kids out the door in the morning, be there in the afternoon, and all set to get her through the employment process. Called several times, left several voicemails, went out to the house, left a note on the door, hey, call me, and crickets. So that's where we're at, unfortunately.
And thank you, Lieutenant Duiker, I know when we chatted about this earlier, you know, when you were made in your new role, someone told you that parking and traffic guards were going to be your 2 biggest headaches, and that's probably, is that true?
I would say so. The people we have that are working for us now, I can't say enough good things about. I mean, it's a thankless job, no doubt about it. And to sit there and have to plan your day around getting up and calling dispatch before 7 in the morning, being out on the street in any kind of weather for an hour in the morning, then going about your day, and then having to sit there and think, hey, I've got to be out there at, afternoon. That's a pretty big ask and a heck of a challenge for these folks. So I certainly appreciate it.
Yeah, and I will say, just as a parent who walks his kid to school every day, it's good for him to get exercise in all weather. And we get them Christmas gifts, and they're like members of our family. The folks that actually walk every day, because you see them every day, and whether it's 2 feet of snow or not, they're out there. So I know I certainly appreciate the work they do, even though it's a tough job. Any questions from the committee or other members of council to the police department about kind of the current situation?
Thank you. I do agree with you. I often wonder how do you find people to work those split shifts? I mean, I think it used to be in the day when there were people that were retiring at a younger age that had flexibility and they were able to do that. But I do think it's an incredible challenge today. Have you reached out perhaps to the Kiwanis for help and volunteers?
That we have not. Like I said, when we started the year with the massive shortage that it literally hit one day. It was the day of our meeting. I got a phone call earlier in the day from somebody saying that their physical health was to the point where they couldn't stand out there every day. Loved the job, just couldn't do it anymore. Gentleman showed up for the meeting. I start getting ready to lay my papers out, and he's like, hang on, before you sit there and get all settled, I've got to watch my grandchildren this year. I'm not going to be able to help you out. So that was another one that I wasn't counting on. After that, we did reach out to the PTA through SRO Jameson to try and see if we could get any assistance in that regard. Maybe some parents that were staying home, that sort of thing. Because honestly, that is your 2 best sources of people for these jobs are either retirees or parents that have the ability to sit there and stay home to try and, get their kids out and about. So that's usually where we're looking for potential candidates from.
Well, you might try the Kiwanis because they're certainly so ingrained in the community and are always looking for opportunities, and they may be a good resource. Also, what about some of the retirement communities like the Westerly? I mean, if you could capitalize on some of those people who are retired, those that are fit enough to do it,
Right.
it may give them extra income that might be helpful to them. And
Okay.
they could assume positions close to where they live. You know, we have Fedor Manor over by Birdtown, so it wouldn't be hard for people to just kind of walk out their door and
Right.
attend to some of those posts, but those may be some things to consider.
Okay.
Councilman Scheckman?
Thank you. I'm just wondering if there's any analysis or that looked at, at what price point would it be worth going up to if it combated some of the overtime costs? Wonder more of a yes or no.
I'm sorry, if I'm hearing you right, you want to know, there's been no analysis done for that. I mean, it's pretty you could probably figure it out with the rate of pay for a school guard, was about $17 an hour?
1722, I believe, was the last figure I had.
So those, just round up, those folks are making about $35 a day. When we pay the overtime, it's far more than that.
Right. So, I mean, depending on if you're raising, like what I'm saying is, if you raise the cost or raise the salary, I just want to know at what point would that be offset?
Right.
The overtime cost?
It'd be tough because of the sporadic nature of the call-offs, but yeah, it's definitely something worth exploring, I would probably,
Councilman Rader, do you have a question?
I was also going to ask about pay. I was just curious. I remember we had raised the pay from like $12.65 to $15 an hour when we passed our $15 an hour ordinance for all city employees, but 17, interesting. It's good to note. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's much of a large financial incentive there, though I know many people do it for many, many reasons, I think. Echo my colleagues' thanks to the members of the Crossing Guard crew who are here tonight, too. Thanks for coming out, and I'm hopefully we'll have some time for public comment towards the end, so wanted to also note that. So,
Yeah, thank you, and I wanted to make sure we had time for public comment as well. At this point, I think it would make sense to go into the second part of the meeting where we discuss, and this is, I just saw the city, thank you, today sent out information about the active transportation plan, and I think a lot of people in the schools got emails to kind of comment on the active transportation network. So I apologize, I put Assistant Director Boss here, but it looks like we have the head honcho, so thank you, Director Leininger. Could the administration kind of explain where we're at in the active transportation plan, and then the Safe Streets for All, or Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program, and kind of what the work that our consultant did showing maybe an ability to have an enhanced network of traffic guards?
Sure. And while I'm talking, Council Clerk Bach, if you could pull up the next image that has 37 crossing guards. So thank you, Councilmember Bullock, or Mr. Chairman, members of City Council. We are currently undertaking two planning initiatives right now. One, and they're both related and on parallel tracks. One is the active transportation plan that is examining all of our non-vehicular connections in our community, trying to understand where they are, where there's gaps, and trying to fully build out that network over the next number of years, particularly those north-south connections that we seem to be lacking here in the community. Along with that, there's a huge safety component with that as well. If you're familiar with the Safe Routes to School program, which is an ODOT-sponsored, Ohio Department of Transportation-sponsored program, it involves elements of that Safe Routes to School program incorporated into the plan. And that's important here in Lakewood because, as you all know, we've talked about this in this committee and at City Council, regular City Council meetings, is that since the City of Lakewood does not provide busing, everybody has to get to school either by foot, by bike, or by personal vehicle. We'd like more and more people, we'd like more students to bike and walk than the personal vehicles, because it creates all kinds of other issues with at the schools with traffic and backups. But some of this plan starts to work through some of those programmatic items. The tangential side of the tangential effort that's going on then is focused in on vehicular safety, and that's the Safe Streets for All initiative. That program is actually coming out of recent federal programming, a significant amount of funding, infrastructure dollars that is being directed towards creating safe streets. So in that analysis, we are looking at the high-risk network, trying to identify what the high-risk network is in the city for vehicular and pedestrian interactions. As part of going through that, then, they will identify some broad brush improvements that we can make throughout the entire community, with ultimately the goal of getting to zero crashes and zero death crashes, particularly whether that's vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to pedestrian, but looking at all safety facets. Those efforts have been going on for about a year now, actually a little bit over a year now, and are in the home stretch. As Councilman Baker referenced, we did just put out today, as well as through the schools, final notice on the last item of public input, which is looking at all the improvements that are being proposed as part of the active transportation plan. They're all laid out in a map where people can comment, people can add, delete, make recommendations to us as we start to finalize that plan. The Safe Streets for All is in a similar pattern. That's more of an internal effort, but a lot of those elements are also incorporated into the active transportation element plan as well, where we're looking at that high-risk network and those safety improvements. We expect those efforts to be completed here over the next month or so, and then present them to a city council and a city council committee meeting in the very near future. As part of that effort, we did ask the consultant to take a look at our existing crossing guard locations, the 29 locations, and make recommendations for changes as part of that. The most recent version of that 29 crossing guard map that we had up previously basically shows generally where we have our crossing guards located now are coordinated and consistent with what we've identified as the high-risk network. There's been a little bit of movement if you look at the orange figure that's up at Clifton and Nicholson. That figure seems to move back and forth a little bit between there and Lake as far as where that position has been located, but in the recent map, they're showing it at Clifton and Nicholson. So with that in mind, then looking forward to the future to say, okay, if our high-risk network is this, without trying to limit any constraints, putting any constraints on the consultant about where we should potentially add crossing guards because of priority intersections or intersections that perhaps need a higher level of safety. Where should those be? And so that's what the map that's up here now, and their recommendation would be to go from 29 crossing guards, which includes 6 substitutes, for a total of 35 crossing guards, going to 37 crossing guards, which we then have to add a number of substitutes to go along with that. This is where they would identify those guards to be located. One of them is the relocated one at Nicholson and Clifton that I mentioned. The other ones then are shown in green. The new locations are shown in green, with all of the existing shown then in blue, and all the schools, whether they're public or private, identified here. Even some of the daycares are the preschool, pre-K, identified here on the map. So in a world, given what we know about where the student population is now, and students, of course, as they age out or age through our system, the student population kind of moves like an amoeba through the city. It'll change over time, but based on our high-risk network, based on where the students are, this is where the consultant's recommendations are for where crossing guards should be located in our community. And that carries with a lot of the concerns that you've heard already expressed from the police department as far as it's great that we show 37, but we have to figure out a way to get to 37, given the hiring struggles and retention struggles that we've had over the last several years. And certainly there's a lot of thought being given to that. I'm sure we'll talk about here this evening, trying to understand, are there other partners that we can work with in the community, whether that's the schools, whether that's with PTAs, whether that's with other groups that have been mentioned here this evening. So, but this was part of that effort and tangential to the conversation here this evening.
Thank you, Director Leininger. And so can you kind of explain in layman's terms what the high-risk network is and so what that means from a data perspective?
So the high-risk network was the result of a data exercise looking at our 5-year history of crashes, and that crashes are vehicular crashes are pedestrian crashes, they are vehicular against pedestrian crashes. As they looked through all of that data, they started to identify where those corridors are. As you might expect, they are along Clifton, they are along Detroit, and they are along Madison. There are some north-south high-risk portions along Warren. Warren was the main one. There might have been, I think there was some along West Clifton, but identifying where those safety points are. And as part of that, then I'm marrying that then with where the students live to identify the routes that they would be most likely to take to school if they were walking or biking, and then resulting in NISC. The high-risk network is a document that's been shared in past public input sessions for the Safe Routes, or I'm sorry, the Safe Streets for All, as well as the ATP. Unfortunately, I didn't bring it here this evening to share with you all, but it is a data analysis, data exercise to determine where those highest risk for crashes or accidents would be located.
It's essentially a heat map with certain streets being more red
Exactly.
than others. Yeah.
Exactly.
Any questions from the committee about, or to Director Leininger? No? Or Councilman Bullock?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. A couple questions. First, I've read the agenda, and I know that maybe this is coming up still, but there's a question about amending the substitute to eliminate the cap, the number.
Yeah.
I support that. I don't see why we would. I'm not familiar with the legislative history about why there would be a cap on that number dating back to whenever, but
Yeah, as I didn't want to violate public meetings law, I haven't had discussions with the council committee members about it, but open, at some point in this meeting to talk about removing the cap, putting the minimum. I think there's a bunch of different ways we can go, and also input from the administration.
yeah, that's a good direction for us to drive. This map here, I gather, is not the committee's map, but the planning department consultant's map. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay, so I love that we're doing process. We plan and we develop plans and we do surveys, and we do surveys again next year, and then we get recommendations. But I don't want us to not use common sense. And I know there's people on this committee who have walking routes and see firsthand the pretty aggressive driving on some of the roads, especially around Hayes Elementary, where it's a car-centric road design rather than a traditional pedestrian-centric neighborhood street in much or most of Lakewood. And even on those streets, we have chronic speeding, which is a perennial topic. We all talk about the traffic calming program. We talk to the police leadership about the need for traffic enforcement. And anybody who spends time in the neighborhood is probably the number one or top three issue that comes up continually is speeding. So I think we know, without having to wait for task forces and data, that we need more traffic guards, and that investing in this makes sense. And I think there needs to be some urgency. I mean, I understand that it's a challenge to get personnel, but we got to make it happen. Our starting point can't be, we tried and we're struggling. We've got to make it happen. And also, I always struggle with the traffic data world in which we only consider safety justified after accidents happen rather than we prevent. I know that what we're doing is we're trying to rationalize and triage and prioritize scarce resource. That's perfectly logical. But if we see on a walking route to school that there's a traffic pattern and chronic speeding and a road design that isn't safe, then we should err on the side of adding traffic guards and every other tool in our traffic safety box.
And Councilman, I want to be
Thanks.
clear here that the committee isn't like codifying this map. It was simply and I appreciate the administration working with us on this because they have the resources and the ability to engage, the folks that ODOT has pre-certified to kind of give us this data, and that's what kind of taps you into the vein of those funding streams to get more funds to do things like this. And I just thought it was worthwhile to have the committee kind of see it, have the public comment on it to the extent. And also, what we're proposing here tonight is to expand or lift the cap to give the administration the ability to still be flexible based on what you just discussed.
Certainly. So thanks, Mr. Chair. Let me contextualize. This is a wonderful map. I'm glad the administration is working with the committee, and that's a starting point. So I'm just giving my rah-rah speech to use this as a minimum, not the maximum. And also that we ultimately are the decision makers, the elected officials in the community, and we I think, are in very firm footing to prioritize traffic safety, especially when it comes to safe walking routes to schools. So thank you for the thoroughness of the effort by the planning department and the police leadership. But you know, I don't think we'll be successful if we're not moving emphatically and forcefully in the direction of expanding our traffic guards this year. That's my perspective. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilperson Keppel?
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm not on this committee, but I'm popping in anyway. So I'm sorry that I was coming in from teaching a class, but the traffic guard on this map, and knowing that this is not a set in stone map, this is just a recommendation from the consultant, but the one that's relocated, where is that relocated from? I missed that, I'm sorry.
Basically from a block to the north at Lake in Nicholson.
So it would be moving to the Clifton
Yes.
block. I'm just going to add my 2 cents that I would love to see a traffic guard there. I teach a class at Garfield at after school, and the traffic from St. Ed's and Emerson and Garfield on that corner, like, I don't know how many times kids have almost run in front of my car, so put me down as a supporter of having a traffic guard there. I know to watch, but not everybody does. And then I think that's it. I really appreciate the administration getting this information to us for tonight's discussion, so thanks.
Thank you. And, you know, I do want to leave some time for public comment, but I also would, you know, in kind of starting this discussion, was a member of the public who lived in who her children, you know, had to walk a very far distance, and there was some challenging kind of ability to feel like her kids could be safe going to school, and I certainly understand that. But, you know, in kind of going through this process, we also engaged the school district, particularly Mark Walter, who is a new director with the school district, but has been with the school district for a long time and graduate of the schools as well. So I make sure I want to include you in this conversation tonight publicly. You know, have you had a chance to look at this map, or do you have any thoughts or comments on it, or?
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank council and the administration for taking on this task. It is long overdue. You know, being a high school and middle school principal for many years, I've seen far too many kids getting hit, and a lot of near misses also. I actually reached out to the middle school and elementary school principals to get their input, and that was actually prior to seeing this map. And a lot of the key areas that I've seen personally and also received feedback on have been addressed with the proposed additions. I think it's going to make a major improvement to the safety of the kids coming and going. And the only thing that I can offer is we do have a large number of folks employed by the school that are part-time. They work 3.5 hours a day, study hall monitors, nutrition services, paraprofessionals. So we would be happy to help advertise any of those positions, and it might be they can do morning and not afternoon, and vice versa. But and you know, I can't guarantee that there'll be that many people that apply, but it's definitely a pool of folks that would welcome some additional hours, but also may have some availability at those key times.
Thank you, Mr. Walter, because that kind of led into, you know, and this is, the point of this meeting is to discuss the codified ordinances and the cap, but I think, you know, anytime council can help elevate an issue from a resident or kind of make us think about why things are the way they are and, you know, what maybe we can do to improve, just something that we maybe haven't thought of. But I do think that there's an opportunity for, and it's not the point of this meeting, but further to engage with the schools to see if, you know, particularly on school grounds, like some of these crossing guards are a mile away from the school. Some of them are on school grounds. So is there a way to partner with the school to, in some sort of agreement where school staff could be those crossing guards closer to the school so that we can further enhance the network with city employees out further? It sounds like you're at least open to having that conversation and kind of where we go with it. I think, I'm certainly committed to working with the administration to see that conversation is furthered. I know, if we were to sit down and actually run the numbers, which I will reach out to Director Rancourt to do, the choice between paying overtime and taking a city staff member away from their full-time job, whether that's law enforcement or public works, paying someone straight time from the school district would probably save money as well. So it could be a win-win where the city is actually outlaying less and the schools are simply just utilizing some of their own, staff to help, in which case we have an enhanced services as a community, which ultimately as a member of the public doesn't care if it's a school or the city, they just want to see safer routes to school for kids. Councilperson Keppel?
Thank you. And again, I apologize if this was covered before I came in, but are the traffic guards, are they all required to work the morning and afternoon shift, or can they choose mornings only or afternoon only? Do we know?
The ones that are at the 29 permanent crossings are obligated for mornings and afternoons. The subs, the intent is to sit there and have them follow the same schedule. We've got one or two where they've got other commitments. So at this point, with hiring challenges that we're undergoing, it's kind of take what we can get sort of thing. I know one, I believe, is a professor down at Cleveland State. So it's one of those things where, they're only able to sit there and work mornings or afternoons, so.
If I could add too, we recently had a discussion to see, perhaps we could change the hours of the crossing guards to make it more attractive. Because as we discussed, having someone come at 8 roughly and 2, it can be very challenging. So we're evaluating some options, and if not already, soon we're going to be sending a survey out to our crossing guards about being interested in only doing mornings or only doing afternoons or both, because one thought is perhaps we have a hybrid crossing guard / parks guard position where someone starts their shift at 2 to 3 at the school and then wraps up their day at the parks for security. So we're evaluating that as an option as well, knowing how difficult it is to attract people and to keep people in these positions.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Councilperson Keppel.
If I, just to follow up on that, that's, I bring that up partly to the mayor's point about making it more feasible to hire, but also in light of the legislation before the committee tonight, that for that conversation is by limiting to a number of people versus hours or locations, then that sort of limits that option, which might make it more attractive. So it's something just to be considered by the committee as they consider the legislation. Thanks.
Thank you. And then I want to make, is there anyone, Clerk, is there anyone signed in for a public comment or not? I know some folks are here, but I don't know if they're. Oh, well, yeah, come on up, Emily. And then there is a public comment as well online from Dan Zielinski, who I believe is here. Yeah, but yeah, I welcome you to come up and give your name and address, and then interested in your comments. Thank you for coming tonight.
All right. Daniel Zielinski, 2197 Northland Avenue. And I just want to say I love this effort and the narrative that you guys are laying out here. And Councilman Bullock, I love the attitude there. So I'm a data scientist. I work with data and numbers, and I saw Councilman Baker's communication about the traffic guards, and it prompted me to think, well, how many kids are actually struck by a vehicle during school commute hours. So I went to the police crash reports, and I went through the past few weeks, and I was able, in the past 7 weeks, I was able to find 5 children between the ages of 13 and 17 that had a collision with a vehicle during these school commute hours. And I found that to be a motivating number, so that prompted me to bring the conversation here. As far as a solution to a problem like that, right? I see it breaking down into 2 categories. Improvements in the information space, the collection of that sort of information, and the publishing of that sort of information. I would envision something of the nature, the police department collects it, and the school board in a newsletter, I know I get those quarterly or whatever they are, they take that number and publish it. I know with a lot of SRTS programs, they like to publish like how many kids ride bikes or walk, but that sort of number seems less useful to me than a number of, well, how many kids actually had a collision. That's something that I would want to know, and I would love for it to be 0 and to be proud and say 0. On the other side of a solution would be the operation side, and obviously this traffic guard or crossing guard would be part of it, and I would absolutely support just remove the cap and just solve the problem, however that shakes out. One solution that I think is very creative that might be useful in this context, especially what is a traffic guard or a crossing guard? You might find a little bit of space there. There's a program in Portland, and it's a PE teacher. The guy goes by Coach Balto, and he's adapted a program. I think it originally in Spain or something like that. But it's called a bike bus, and this guy goes out to the start of a route, and then goes by a bunch of students' houses on bikes to work and escorts them by bike to school. Sorry, to work, but escorts them by bike to school. And with the exception of maybe videos of puppies and children on the internet, the videos of these things, it's one of the most heartwarming things I think that's out there. I encourage anyone that's listening to go out and take a look at that. It's just the YouTube bike bus. It's out there. It's easy to find. With that, I just want to say that I think this is exactly the right concept. That I take space away from cars and rededicate it back to the public, away from these private, very dangerous devices. And with that, that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Zielinski. And yeah, our community, we get all the kids together in a corner, and then we all walk as if, as a group or bike as a group. So that's a great idea. And I did not get a chance to watch the video today because it was sent. And I had a crazy
I
day.
figured there was a late. Yeah.
So I apologize. I'll watch it tonight, though.
Yeah, it's going to be there.
Yeah. And Ms. Lindberg, I think, is the next public commenter.
Thank you. I also am a huge fan of the bike.
So, sorry, I know your name and address, or I know your name and where you live, but if you give it for the committee.
Emily Lindberg, 1651 Lauderdale Avenue. I was just, one thing that came to mind listening to the comments tonight with the issues of scheduling, and something that I didn't hear come up yet today was, who are these crossing guards for? So it's my understanding, but it was not stated today, that these crossing guards are specifically for the elementary schools. Is that true? I'm not sure, but I know if they're starting at 8 o'clock and they're going till 9 o'clock, if middle school starts right after 8 o'clock, I'm assuming that they're not for the middle school. And if the high school is starting before that, they're not for the high school students. So is it possible that these crossing guards should be at these locations earlier in the day, especially when it's dark out in the winter time? Especially when you say that the crashes are happening to 13 and 17-year-olds, like they're older kids that are getting struck. So is that something that needs to be thought of? That was just one thing that came to mind. I'm also a huge fan of the walking bus idea and bike bus programs, and if we could incorporate that somehow, but I don't know. That's kind of a different thing probably. But yeah, you'd still have like that issue of the split shift, but it would extend the hours. And if there's a situation where you can offer, like, okay, maybe someone can only do morning, but it's a 2-hour morning instead of just 1 hour, that might be more appealing to people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lindberg. And then I also have Gail Davis for public comment.
Hi there, I'm Gail Davis, as Kyle mentioned. I live at 1566 St. Charles Avenue. And I just wanted to speak up in favor of the flexible shifts. My children attend Grant Elementary School. We have one intersection that one road that we have to cross that's not Victoria Avenue, and it is the Warren-Franklin intersection. And I walk it every day. We have never driven our children to school. We walk with a large group of neighbors who rely on our group. We have usually between 13 and 15 kids who walk with 2 to 3 adults. And I just wanted to speak in favor of that because we have had a veteran crossing guard for a while who is not with us this year, or at least in the fall, and so we have a newbie who is doing the crossing guard duty, and they are doing a good enough job. But in the afternoon, there is such a high volume of traffic in that intersection specifically, and I'm sure it exists at other intersections too, so I apologize that I can't speak to other intersections. I see this one every day at pickup and drop off. And during the afternoon, and it's actually, if you're looking at the map, it's the one smack dab in the middle. If you try to, throw a dart in the center, that's the intersection I'm talking about. And in the afternoon, you have kids coming from Grant Elementary who are going in the southeast direction. You have children, teenagers and kids coming from the high school who are going to all points west in Lakewood. You have the Albert Einstein Academy students as well. And at that time of day, we could really use a second crossing guard. There's not much room at each corner. The sidewalks are very tight. There are a lot of children in all directions. So I just wanted to speak out in favor of flexible shifts because we could use, I think one crossing guard is sufficient in the morning. I really do. I think the volume is served by one well enough. But in the afternoon, we could use a second. So if there is a way to make any sort of flexible shifts, I like the idea of, however it happens, if there is a way to get two people there in the afternoon, and there probably are other intersections as well that could be served by that, probably close to middle schools and other elementary schools where you have everyone coming out at once, and newly licensed drivers coming from the high school as well. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. And I know in talking to Director Walter, you probably actually have more kids walking home from school than walking to school, so that makes sense that, there would be also more cars and more kids all at the same time in the afternoon, so it creates a challenge. Councilman Schachner.
At this time, I'd like to make a motion. I would move to amend the current form of ordinance 17-2023 to read under Section E, under duties, in the second line, I would like to move to delete not more than 38. So it would read, the mayor as director of public safety is hereby authorized to employ traffic guards to relieve or replace regular police officers at school crossings, and so on.
Stole the motion out of my mouth, so thank you. I would be interested in, so there's a motion, I'll go ahead and second it so that we can have discussion about it. Thoughts from the administration on that plan?
Yeah, thank you. As someone who also walked home from school in Lakewood, and as a parent of a 2-year-old who will soon be walking, not too soon, but there's no greater priority than the safety of our kids. So, currently, as the administration, we operate under the current ordinances. And so that is how we've operated. So I thank you, Councilman Baker, for taking a thorough review at this and looking at it to make sure that we adjust our crossing guards to fit, our current needs. And then the question becomes for all of us, what is that appropriate need? And so we can make observations based on some data analysis, from visual analysis, but we all need to come together and figure out what is that appropriate amount. So I would say I would be in favor of striking the limit altogether, because this map is going to be something that we have to constantly review. There may be changes. I think the school has just announced this week the closing of Franklin School of Opportunity, and there's a guard there. So that's obviously need to be adjusted. So we're going to need that sort of flexibility to adjust with the times and adjust with the needs. So I'm certainly in favor of striking that number as we work to figure out what exactly the appropriate number is.
Thank you, Mayor. And yeah, the clerk looked a little bit to try to figure out what the derivation of the cap was, and we did not find out. So there's probably some city hall worker from 40 years ago that knows, but we certainly don't here on council. So with that, there's a motion on the table to, do I first have to substitute the ordinance, Maureen? Is that? Okay, so there's one motion on the floor right now to strike not more than 38. It's been made and seconded, so I'll go ahead and call vote for it for the committee. All those in favor say aye. Aye. So that passes. The second motion I will make is in section, actually, I think the numbering's a little off in the ordinance, but in section, I think it's D, there was crossing guard was put in there, so I would make a motion to put traffic guard in there to keep the nomenclature the same, even though we probably didn't do that during this meeting, but we probably should in the code. So I'll make a motion to substitute crossing guard in the ordinance to traffic guard. Is there a second? There's a motion, a second. Any discussion on that point? All those in favor say aye. Aye. So approved. And I think that concludes, or, sorry, can I get a motion to recommend, pardon?
Yeah, just that I notice, I don't know if it is in the substitute version or it's just a version I have in Granicus, that it just, the lettering due to Microsoft Word formatting just kept on going. So I would just move to amend the lettering
To reflect the
to
code.
reflect the way it's supposed to be, essentially.
Okay, well,
remove the extraneous.
we'll do that motion first. So, that's motion made. Man, my drafting in the evenings is terrible. I apologize to everyone here. Put kids to bed and then draft some ordinances. So that first motion, I'll second that. All those in favor say aye. Aye. And then, Maureen, what's the next motion? Okay. So I will go ahead and make a motion to strike 2, right? Would that be the correct? I will make the motion to strike 2. Is there a second on that?
Sure, second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And then now I'll make a motion to recommend adoption of the substituted and amended ordinance to full council. All those in favor say aye. Aye. So at this point, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Second, and I will say that I think Keep Lakewood Beautiful in 7 minutes is going to have something out in the hallway, so encourage everyone to attend. Motion to adjourn was made and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, thank you.